Most people don't reject Jesus. They just quietly edit him. They love the healer, the forgiver, the gentle shepherd with children on his lap. They post the verses about peace and purpose. They quote the promises about blessing. But there are words he spoke that rarely make it onto coffee mugs or Instagram captions. Words that don't comfort at first, words that interrupt, words that expose. And the uncomfortable truth is this: we don't usually deny those teachings out loud. We simply live as if he never said them. Jesus did not gather crowds by lowering the bar. He raised it. He looked ordinary people in the eye and told them things that sounded impossible. Deny yourself. Love your enemies. Sell what you have. Forgive again and again and again. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the religious elite, you will not enter the kingdom. Those aren't soft suggestions. They are direct commands. Somewhere along the way, many believers learned how to celebrate Jesus without surrendering to him. We sing about his lordship, but negotiate with his authority. We admire his compassion, but resist his correction. And maybe the reason some of us feel spiritually stuck isn't because God is silent, but because we have been skipping the sentences that would actually change us. Stay with this, even if it presses on something you would rather leave untouched, because growth never begins where everything feels comfortable. One of the first teachings people quietly avoid is self-denial. Jesus said that anyone who wants to follow him must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow. Daily. Not when it is convenient, not when it fits your schedule. Deny yourself. That cuts against everything American culture teaches. We are told to find ourselves, express ourselves, protect our happiness at all costs. Jesus says there is a self that must be refused. He is not asking for self-hatred. He is asking for surrender of control. The cross was not a metaphor for mild inconvenience. It was an instrument of execution. To take up your cross means something in you dies. Your right to always be first. Your demand to always be understood. Your insistence on getting even. That is not dramatic language. That is discipleship. And here is why many quietly avoid it. Because self-denial feels like loss before it feels like freedom. We fear that if we truly surrender, we will miss out. Jesus says the opposite. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. The paradox is the path. If you have ever felt torn between what you want and what you know he is asking, you are standing at the edge of this teaching. The question is not whether you believe it. The question is whether you will practice it when no one is watching. Another teaching we often soften is this: love your enemies. Not tolerate them, not ignore them, love them. Pray for those who persecute you, bless those who curse you. In a culture that runs on outrage and retaliation, this sounds almost irresponsible. We are quick to defend our side, to justify our anger, to explain why this person does not deserve kindness. Jesus did not include an exception clause. He did not say love your enemies if they apologize first. He did not say pray for them if they stop offending you. He said love them so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. That means our treatment of opponents reveals our resemblance to God. This teaching is not sentimental. It is confrontational. It asks you to release the right to revenge. It asks you to see a human being where you prefer to see a villain. It asks you to step into a mercy that feels undeserved, because that is the same mercy you live on. Many quietly avoid this because it feels unfair. It is. Grace always is. But if you have been nursing a grudge and calling it justice, listen carefully. The way of Christ is not powered by payback. It is powered by forgiveness. Then there is the teaching about secret devotion. Jesus said, when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door. When you fast, do not make it obvious. The Father who sees in secret will reward you. This strikes at something subtle but powerful, the craving to be seen, even in spiritual things. Especially in spiritual things, it is possible to perform righteousness for applause and still call it faith. Jesus exposes the motive. Who are you trying to impress, God or people? The teaching is uncomfortable because it strips away the audience. It removes the spotlight. It says your truest life with God will often be invisible to others. In an age where everything is shared and measured and reacted to, secrecy feels like obscurity. But Jesus says secrecy with the Father is strength. When the room is quiet and there is no validation, that is where character is formed. Many avoid this because it means letting go of spiritual image management. It means doing the right thing even when no one knows you did it. It means trusting that heaven's attention is enough. If your faith would collapse without recognition, then it is recognition you have been worshiping. Let that land. Another teaching that rarely gets preached in full is about money. Jesus spoke about money more than most topics, and he did not speak gently about its grip. You cannot serve both God and money. Not you should not. You cannot. He told a rich young man to sell what he had and give to the poor. The man walked away sad because he had great wealth. We often comfort ourselves by saying that was a specific instruction to a specific person. Maybe it was. But the principle is universal. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The issue is not the number in your bank account. It is the position of your heart. Does money dictate your obedience? Does it determine your generosity? Does it quietly shape your decisions more than Scripture does? In a culture built on accumulation, this teaching feels threatening. It suggests that security might not be what you think it is. It implies that wealth can become a rival god. That is why many avoid it. We would rather believe we can manage both. Jesus says allegiance is singular. If you have ever felt tension when generosity costs you something real, you are brushing up against this teaching. The question is simple and piercing. Who do you trust to take care of you? And before you dismiss this as extreme, remember that the earliest believers shared what they had so that none among them were in need. That was not communism. That was conviction. As you listen, resist the urge to measure this against someone else's life. Measure it against your own. Because these teachings are not abstract ideals, they are invitations, and they are also dividing lines. There is another teaching that many Christians admire from a distance, but rarely apply up close, and it is the command to forgive without limits. Peter once tried to be generous and asked how many times he should forgive someone who sinned against him. 7 times sounded spiritual. Jesus answered 70 times 7, not a number to calculate, but a mindset to adopt. Forgiveness without a ceiling. That sounds beautiful until you are the one who has been betrayed, lied to, humiliated, abandoned. We prefer forgiveness in theory. We avoid it in practice when the wound is still open. Yet Jesus tied our experience of mercy directly to our willingness to extend it. In the prayer he taught, he connected forgiveness received to forgiveness given. That linkage unsettles us because it removes the option of selective grace. We want justice for others and mercy for ourselves. Jesus does not separate the two. He warns that if we refuse to forgive from the heart, we trap ourselves in a prison of resentment. Many quietly avoid this teaching because forgiveness feels like letting the offender win. In reality, it is the only way you stop losing peace every time their name crosses your mind. Forgiveness is not denial of harm. It is refusal to let harm dictate your future. It does not mean reconciliation without wisdom. It means releasing the debt so that bitterness does not define you. If you have been holding on to an offense and calling it strength, hear this clearly. Unforgiveness is not power. It is a chain, and you can choose today to drop it, even if the other person never apologizes. Another teaching that makes us uncomfortable is Jesus' insistence on radical inner purity. He said that anger in the heart is akin to murder, and lustful intent is akin to adultery. That takes morality out of the realm of public behavior and moves it into private thought. We are often satisfied if we have not crossed certain visible lines. Jesus addresses the source beneath the surface. He refuses to let us hide behind technical innocence. If the heart is corrupt, the behavior will eventually follow. This is why he spoke about plucking out an eye or cutting off a hand if it causes you to sin. Not literal self-harm, but decisive action, drastic measures to guard your soul. Many quietly avoid this because it demands more than image management. It requires inner examination. It asks you to confront patterns you justify. It calls you to shut doors you prefer to keep cracked open. In a world saturated with temptation and distraction, purity feels unrealistic. Jesus presents it as necessary, not to earn love, but to live in freedom. If you keep saying everyone struggles, so it must be normal, remember that normal is not the standard. Holiness is. That word makes people nervous because it sounds rigid. In truth, holiness is alignment with the character of God. It is not about looking superior, it is about becoming whole. If there is an area of your private life you would be ashamed to see projected on a screen, that is where this teaching meets you, and ignoring it will not make it disappear. Jesus also taught about the narrow way. He said the gate is wide and the road is broad that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Those words challenge the comfortable assumption that sincerity is enough. We like inclusive language. We like the idea that most paths converge. Jesus did not present multiple routes. He presented himself as the way. That exclusivity offends modern sensibilities. It sounds intolerant. Yet if truth is real, it cannot be infinitely flexible. The narrow way is not about elitism. It is about clarity. It acknowledges that following Christ will not always align with majority opinion. There will be moments when obedience isolates you, when cultural approval evaporates, when compromise would be easier. Many quietly avoid this teaching because it threatens social belonging. We want to follow Jesus without losing influence or acceptance. But the narrow way means sometimes choosing faithfulness over applause. It means standing firm when others drift. It means letting Scripture shape your convictions more than trends shape your comfort. If you have ever felt pressure to dilute your faith, to avoid conflict, you have felt the pull of the wide road. The question is not which road feels crowded. The question is which one leads to life. Jesus never promised that the narrow way would be popular. He promised that it would be worth it. Another teaching that unsettles us is his warning about judging others while ignoring our own flaws. He spoke of a speck in your brother's eye and a plank in your own. It is easy to critique. It is harder to confess. We often measure ourselves against people we perceive as worse and conclude that we are doing fine. Jesus shifts the lens inward. He does not forbid discernment. He forbids hypocrisy. He challenges the reflex to correct others without correcting ourselves. Many quietly avoid this because self-examination is uncomfortable. It disrupts the narrative where we are mostly right and others are mostly wrong. It requires humility. It means acknowledging that you are capable of the same failures you condemn. When you approach correction with a broken spirit rather than superiority, your tone changes, your posture softens, your words heal instead of wound. In a polarized world, humility feels weak. In the kingdom of God, it is strength. If you have been quick to expose others but slow to admit your own need for grace, let this teaching slow you down. Before you speak about someone else's flaw, ask where the plank is in your own life. That question can save relationships and guard your heart from pride. And then there is the teaching about storing up treasures in heaven rather than on earth. It sounds poetic until you consider what it means. It means investing in what outlasts you. It means prioritizing eternal impact over temporary success. It means measuring your life not by applause or possessions, but by faithfulness. Earthly treasure rusts, reputations fade, accomplishments get replaced. Heavenly treasure remains. Many quietly avoid this because it requires a shift in ambition. It challenges the definition of success. It suggests that what looks impressive now might be irrelevant later. If your calendar and bank statements reveal your true priorities, would they reflect eternal focus or immediate gratification? That is not a question meant to induce guilt. It is meant to provoke clarity. Jesus invites you to live with the end in mind, to see beyond the present moment, to recognize that every decision plants something that will either wither or endure. If you have been living as though this life is the whole story, pause, consider what you are building, and consider whether it will still matter when time gives way to eternity. Let these words settle without rushing to defend yourself. The discomfort you feel is not condemnation, it is invitation. There is a teaching of Jesus that unsettles even sincere believers because it exposes something we protect fiercely, our need for control. He said, "Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Look at the birds, look at the flowers. Your Father knows what you need. Seek first the kingdom, and these things will be added to you." Those words sound gentle, almost poetic, until you realize what they demand. They demand trust without visible guarantees. We say we trust God, but our anxiety reveals where we really lean. Worry feels responsible, it feels proactive, but Jesus calls it misplaced allegiance. He is not denying reality, he is redefining priority. If your first instinct in uncertainty is fear rather than faith, this teaching confronts you. Many quietly avoid it because letting go of worry feels like losing vigilance. Yet worry has never added a single hour to anyone's life. It only steals peace from the present. To seek first the kingdom means arranging your life around God's purposes before your preferences. It means asking what honors Him before asking what advances you. That shift sounds subtle. It is not. It reshapes decisions about time, money, relationships, ambition, and it forces you to confront the illusion that you are holding everything together. If you have been living in constant tension, trying to secure outcomes through sheer effort, hear this. Trust is not passivity, it is alignment. You still work, you still plan, but you stop carrying what was never yours to carry. The Father who feeds birds is not inattentive to you. The real question is whether you believe that deeply enough to release control. Another teaching that we soften is about taking up daily obedience rather than occasional enthusiasm. Jesus spoke about building a house on rock by hearing His words and putting them into practice, not admiring them, not debating them, doing them. The storm will come either way. The difference is foundation. We like inspiration. We like moments that stir emotion. But Jesus points to consistency, the unseen habits, the quiet choices, the daily obedience that feels ordinary until pressure exposes its strength. Many quietly avoid this because it removes the drama from faith. It says that transformation is less about sudden breakthroughs and more about steady submission. It says that character is formed in repetition, forgiving again, praying again, resisting again, loving again. You cannot outsource that work. No sermon can do it for you. No worship set can replace it. The house stands because the builder acted. If you have been waiting for a perfect season to take obedience seriously, this teaching interrupts that delay. The storm does not schedule itself around your readiness. It reveals it. And then there is the teaching about servant leadership. Jesus said the greatest among you must be the servant of all. He washed feet, he knelt, he took the position of the lowest. In a world that rewards visibility and status, this feels upside down. We are trained to climb. He calls us to kneel. We are told to protect our platform. He tells us to lay down our rights. Many quietly avoid this because service without recognition feels thankless. It is easier to serve when applause follows. It is harder to serve when no one notices. Yet Jesus ties greatness to humility. He does not redefine greatness as weakness. He redefines it as love expressed through action. To serve is to reflect the heart of Christ. It means stepping into inconvenience. It means choosing generosity over self-promotion. It means caring for people who cannot advance your reputation. If you measure your worth by how many people look up to you, this teaching feels threatening. But if you measure it by how closely you resemble Jesus, it becomes freeing. The one who had every right to demand service chose to give it. And that example leaves little room for ego. Another teaching many avoid is the call to radical reconciliation. Jesus said that if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift and go be reconciled first. That means relationship repair takes precedence over religious ritual. We often prefer to worship rather than reconcile. It feels more spiritual to sing than to apologize, more sacred to pray than to initiate a hard conversation. Jesus flips that instinct. He suggests that unresolved conflict matters deeply to God. Many quietly avoid this because reconciliation requires vulnerability. It means admitting fault. It means risking rejection. It means stepping toward someone who may not respond the way you hope. But ignoring tension does not dissolve it. It buries it. And buried resentment has a way of resurfacing in subtle ways. If you have convinced yourself that time alone will fix what pride created, this teaching challenges that narrative. Peace is not passive, it is pursued. And sometimes obedience looks like sending the message you have been postponing or making the call you have been dreading. Finally, there is the teaching about abiding. Jesus said, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Apart from me, you can do nothing." That sounds simple. It is not. Abiding means dependence. It means your strength, your wisdom, your fruitfulness flow from connection, not effort alone. We live in a culture that celebrates self-sufficiency. Abiding dismantles that illusion. It says that productivity without intimacy is empty, that ministry without communion is hollow, that moral effort without relationship becomes brittle. Many quietly avoid this because it slows them down. It requires time, it requires stillness, it requires choosing presence over performance. Yet without abiding, everything else becomes unsustainable. You can serve for a season on adrenaline. You cannot thrive without roots. If you have been running on spiritual fumes, trying to maintain appearances while feeling disconnected inside, this teaching is not an accusation. It is an invitation back to the source. You do not produce fruit by straining. You produce it by staying attached. As these teachings accumulate, they form a pattern. They are not random rules. They are a way of life. A life shaped by surrender, mercy, purity, trust, humility, reconciliation, devotion. Many quietly avoid them not because they reject Jesus, but because following him this closely feels costly, and it is. But the cost of partial obedience is quiet stagnation. The cost of full obedience is transformation. If something in you recognizes that you have been circling around these teachings without stepping into them, do not harden your heart. Lean in, not out of fear, but out of hunger. Because the Jesus who speaks hard words is the same Jesus who gives strength to live them. And the life on the other side of obedience is not smaller, it is deeper. There is another teaching that many Christians nod at, but rarely let rearrange their priorities, and it is the call to count the cost before following him. Jesus told people to consider what it means to build a tower or go to war. No one starts without calculating what it will require. He applied that logic to discipleship. He was not selling a product. He was inviting surrender. He made it clear that following him might divide families, disrupt comfort, cost reputation. That honesty feels jarring in a culture that markets faith as an upgrade to an already stable life. Many quietly avoid this because they prefer inspiration to sacrifice. They want assurance without upheaval. But Jesus never hid the reality that allegiance to him could create tension in relationships. He spoke about loving him more than father or mother, more than son or daughter. That sounds harsh until you understand that he is not asking you to hate your family. He is asking you to place him above every other loyalty. If your faith depends on universal approval, it is fragile. If your obedience collapses under relational pressure, it was never anchored deeply. Counting the cost is not about scaring you away. It is about preventing shallow commitment. It is about choosing with eyes open rather than drifting in by emotion. If you have treated discipleship as a hobby rather than a foundation, this teaching challenges you to reconsider what you signed up for. Another teaching that makes people uncomfortable is his insistence that the last will be first and the first will be last. That overturns the ranking systems we rely on. We compare success, influence, visibility. Jesus compares humility, faithfulness, sacrifice. In his kingdom, the widow's small offering outweighed large donations given for show. The servant who was faithful with little was entrusted with much. This teaching dismantles the scoreboard we use. It suggests that heaven's metrics are different from earth's. Many quietly avoid this because it destabilizes ambition. It means you cannot measure your worth by position. It means obscure obedience matters. It means quiet integrity counts. In a world where attention is currency, this feels counterintuitive. Yet Jesus consistently elevated those overlooked by society and warned those applauded by it. If you have been discouraged because your faithfulness feels unseen, remember that visibility is not validation. And if you have been chasing recognition under the banner of calling, examine your motive. The kingdom does not run on comparison. It runs on surrender. There is also the teaching about asking, seeking, and knocking with persistence. Jesus described a friend who keeps knocking at midnight and a widow who keeps pleading before an unjust judge. He praised persistent faith. That challenges the passive approach many adopt. We pray once and conclude silence means denial. We seek briefly and assume the door is closed. Jesus presents persistence as trust, not desperation. It reflects confidence in the character of God. Many quietly avoid this because persistence requires endurance. It requires continuing when results are delayed. It requires holding on to hope when circumstances contradict expectation. Yet Jesus assures that the Father gives good gifts to those who ask. That does not mean every request is granted exactly as imagined. It means God is not indifferent. If you have allowed disappointment to shrink your prayer life, this teaching invites you to return with boldness. Keep knocking, keep asking, keep seeking, not because God is reluctant, but because relationship deepens through perseverance. And then there is the teaching about being salt and light. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth and the light of the world." Salt preserves and flavors. Light reveals and guides. That implies influence, not loud domination, but visible distinction. Many quietly avoid this because it means standing out. Salt that loses its saltiness is useless. Light hidden under a bowl helps no one. If your faith blends seamlessly into every environment without friction, it may be diluted. This does not call for arrogance. It calls for integrity. It calls for living in a way that reflects truth, even when truth is unpopular. Being light exposes darkness, and that can provoke resistance. Many prefer a private faith that avoids conflict. Jesus envisions a faith that transforms atmosphere. If you have been compartmentalizing belief to avoid tension, reconsider what it means to be light. It is not about winning arguments. It is about embodying a different way of being. Finally, there is the teaching about enduring to the end. Jesus spoke about tribulation, deception, and perseverance. He said that the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. That language does not fit neatly into comfortable narratives. It assumes struggle. It assumes opposition. It assumes that faith is not proven in ease, but in endurance. Many quietly avoid this because it disrupts the idea that following Christ guarantees a smooth path. He never promised that. He promised presence. He promised ultimate victory. But he also promised trials. If your expectation of God centers on comfort, difficulty will shake you. If your expectation centers on faithfulness, difficulty refines you. Endurance is not dramatic heroism. It is steady loyalty over time. It is choosing trust when answers are incomplete. It is clinging to hope when the circumstances tempt you to withdraw. As these teachings converge, they reveal a portrait of discipleship that is demanding yet deeply freeing. They strip away illusions. They dismantle ego. They confront compromise. But they also form a life anchored in something unshakable. If you have been skimming past the harder words of Jesus, consider what you may be missing. His teachings are not designed to burden you. They are designed to reshape you. And reshaping always feels uncomfortable before it feels beautiful. If something in you recognizes that partial obedience has kept you half-formed, do not retreat. Step toward the tension, because on the other side of surrender is a faith that is not fragile, not performative, not dependent on convenience. It is steady, it is rooted, it is alive. All of these teachings converge on one final reality that many prefer not to dwell on, and it is this: not everyone who says, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom. Jesus spoke those words plainly. He described people who prophesied, cast out demons, performed impressive works in his name, and still heard the words, "I never knew you." That is not aimed at atheists. It is aimed at the religious. It pierces the assumption that activity equals intimacy. Many quietly avoid this teaching because it destabilizes spiritual confidence built on performance. It suggests that external success does not guarantee internal connection. It means that knowing about Jesus is not the same as being known by him. That line between familiarity and relationship is thinner than we like to admit. We can attend services, volunteer, give, speak Christian language, and still keep parts of our lives untouched by surrender. Jesus is not impressed by public displays disconnected from private obedience. He looks for alignment. He looks for a heart that actually trusts him. That teaching is uncomfortable because it removes the illusion of control. It forces you to ask whether your faith is rooted in genuine devotion or sustained by habit and image. It is easier to measure church attendance than honesty, easier to track giving than purity, easier to count roles than humility. But Jesus measures differently. He speaks about fruit. Good trees bear good fruit, not perfect fruit, but consistent evidence of transformation. If there is no change over time, no deepening love, no increasing surrender, something is disconnected. This is not meant to induce panic. It is meant to invite reflection. The goal is not to live in fear of rejection. It is to live in closeness that removes that fear. When you abide in him, obedience flows from love, not anxiety. When you truly know him, you do not have to manufacture spiritual proof. The fruit grows because the root is alive. Many avoid this teaching because it requires honesty about the state of the heart. It asks whether your faith would endure without the structure around it. If the building disappeared, if the music stopped, if the community shifted, would your devotion remain? That is the kind of question Jesus' words provoke. And if it unsettles you, that is not necessarily a threat. It can be mercy, because better to examine now than to assume later. At the center of all 14 teachings is one thread. Jesus is not asking for admiration. He is asking for allegiance, not partial, not seasonal, not conditional. Allegiance that reshapes priorities, relationships, ambitions, reactions. Allegiance that shows up when no one is watching and when everyone is watching. Many Christians quietly avoid certain teachings, not because they doubt Jesus' authority, but because they fear the cost of obedience. Yet the paradox remains. The cost of avoiding his words is greater than the cost of following them. Avoidance produces a thin faith, easily shaken by pressure. Obedience produces depth, even if it begins with discomfort. If you sense that you have been editing Jesus to fit your preferences, do not respond with shame. Respond with clarity. Return to his words. Sit with them without rushing to soften them. Let them challenge you. Let them expose you. Let them refine you. This is not about earning love. It is about living in truth. And truth, though sharp at first, becomes freedom. The same Jesus who speaks hard commands also carries strength for those who accept them. He does not demand surrender and then abandon you to achieve it alone. He invites you into a life that is narrower but richer, harder but deeper, costly but unshakable. If you have listened this far and recognized yourself in some of these quiet avoidances, take that recognition seriously, not as condemnation, but as direction. You do not have to remain where you are. You can choose today to stop skimming the difficult parts and start living them. That choice will not make your life smaller, it will make it more honest. And an honest faith, rooted in all of Jesus rather than a curated version, is the kind that endures when everything else shifts. And when you lay all of these teachings side by side, something becomes undeniable. Jesus was not building casual followers. He was forming people who would look different, think different, live different. He was not inviting admiration from a safe distance. He was inviting transformation up close. Every hard word he spoke carries the same heartbeat. I want all of you, not your Sunday self, not your public self, not your religious self, all of you. That is why these teachings feel sharp. They cut through illusion. They expose compromise. They strip away the comfort of partial obedience. But they also reveal something deeper. Jesus never commands without purpose. He never confronts without offering life on the other side. Self-denial leads to freedom from ego. Loving enemies frees you from hatred's grip. Secret devotion roots you in authenticity. Generosity loosens fear. Forgiveness unlocks peace. Purity protects your soul. Trust dissolves anxiety. Servanthood dismantles pride. Reconciliation restores connection. Abiding fuels endurance. Counting the cost prevents collapse. Perseverance shapes resilience. Being salt and light gives meaning. And knowing him, truly knowing him, secures your identity. None of these teachings exist to shrink your life. They exist to anchor it. The reason many Christians quietly avoid them is not because they are unreasonable. It is because they are disruptive. They rearrange priorities. They challenge comfort. They demand intention. Yet a faith that never disrupts you will never transform you. And a Jesus who never challenges you is Lycal.